Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast, partnered with Concussion Pro 1, the world's first dedicated concussion supplement. I'm your host as always, Newsome, and unfortunately co-host John couldn't be here tonight, but I've got a good replacement for you guys in fellow professional gambler and a friend of mine, Daniel Levi, who'll be breaking down the Ultimate Fighter 28 finale, which goes down this Friday night. Thanks for joining me tonight on short notice, Dan. How are you doing, bro?
Doing amazing, Newsome. Thank you so much for having me, man. Excited to talk some fights and cash some bets.
Absolutely, man. Pleasure's all mine. It's been a long time since we've had you on here. Second appearance.
Man, it's good to be back. I believe the last time we spoke was the night that Justin Gaethje fought Eddie Alvarez, so it definitely has been a while. And man, we got a doubleheader this weekend.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward to breaking both cards down. But tonight's just the TUF 28 finale, and just before we start, I'd just like to remind you all that the Premium Bets membership options from Newsome MMA are available on the Newsome MMA website. You've got the options of a standard bronze, silver, and gold membership, and these memberships provide cheaper prices per fight card for those who commit to slightly longer terms, opposed to purchasing my picks individually per week. You can find all of these membership options at newsomemma.co.uk/premium-bets. So without further ado, let's break down the TUF 28 finale now. Similar to last week in China, the bout order is still yet to be confirmed, I think, and there's also going to be some additional fights added to the card for the TUF finalists. So we'll break down what we've got right now and in the order that I'll follow online as well. And I'll add quick picks to the description of the podcast on YouTube when those other fights are confirmed. So let's go. And in the first fight of the night, we've got, in my opinion, what's going to potentially be the fight of the night. Raoni Barcelos versus Chris Gutierrez. So, Dan, I'm interested in who have you got in this one.
Man, what a way to start the card, right? Raoni Barcelos versus Chris Gutierrez. And everyone saw Raoni Barcelos' UFC debut. What a statement he made by going out there and knocking out a guy like Kurt Holobaugh. And just so you guys know, Kurt Holobaugh isn't the first step up in competition this kid's had. He actually went out there and beat Bobby Muffet, the guy who just defeated Chas Skelly in controversial fashion, but he still beat Bobby Muffet, also knocked out Dan Moret. So this is just another step up for him in Chris Gutierrez. And interestingly enough, the big caveat in this fight is the fact that Raoni Barcelos is dropping to 135 pounds. Now, for a lot of people, it seems like a red flag. It seems like a question mark. It's not that for me at all. I actually think it's the best move that he could make, because if you watch that fight with Kurt Holobaugh, Holobaugh was so much bigger than him, and Holobaugh was definitely getting off on some boxing combinations. There were times when he was boxing Raoni Barcelos up, but Raoni's hands are so good. His jiu-jitsu's on a different level. And Chris Gutierrez, I got to say, I've been impressed with this kid for a very long time. We all remember when he went out there and won that very controversial decision against Timur Valiev. It was controversial to the point where, before the decision's even announced, we all acted like we won that Timur Valiev fight. But turns out that wasn't the case. Then they rematch, and Timur got his arm raised. And I got to say about Chris Gutierrez, very flashy on the feet. He can knock guys out with spins. He's also tapped guys out before. Actually got his first career submission win in his last fight against a black belt in Ray Rodriguez. He also knocked out my boy Jimmy Flick, who recently got an upset at LFA as well. The area that I think Raoni Barcelos has a massive advantage here is on the mat. We've seen throughout Chris Gutierrez's career that, he does get his back taken a lot. He is susceptible to the takedowns. And as recently as 2017, Newsome, Jared Sanders. Do you remember Gerard Sanders from the UFC? I don't know if you recall. Do you remember this guy by chance?
Sure. Yeah.
Gerard Sanders went out there and beat Chris Gutierrez, not on 2 judges' scorecards, on all 3 judges' scorecards in 2017. And I know MMA math doesn't mean shit, but I think if a guy like Gerard Sanders is taking you down at will, what's going to happen when someone like Raoni Barcelos, who can mix up the striking to the takedowns, gets on top of you? I think it's going to be a submission win for Raoni Barcelos, and I think people are going to be talking about a new bantamweight contender here.
For sure, and I think people are already talking about Barcelos, and like you've already mentioned, he went out there in his last fight against Kurt Holobaugh, and I think I ended up tweeting at some point in that fight that we're not going to see Barcelos at any less than minus 250 in his next fight. But I don't know, man. I could be wrong here, because I was doing a bit of study on Chris Gutierrez yesterday, and I actually like what I see from the kid now. The thing is with Barcelos, he's a tough guy to fight against. Like, he'll come forward, he's got aggression, he's got power, he'll mix in takedowns. Everything about his performance against Holobaugh was nothing short of impressive. But the two ways to stop a guy like Barcelos is movement, head movement, angling. and second of all, just slowing the fight down. Now, Gutierrez is coming from a Muay Thai background. He's even had Muay Thai fights in extreme knockouts, I think it was. So he's got a really, really heavy Muay Thai background, and the one thing that I noticed that he does a lot in his fights is he uses that teep to the front of the knee and just little kicks like that just to slow his opponents down, to stop them coming forward, and it just allows him to adopt his Muay Thai style and just plod forward and just land his shots. And in regards to the takedown defense, I actually think it's getting a little better each fight. He's training out of Factory X now, which is a great camp, and they're having a lot of success lately. And I do feel like Chris Gutierrez may be a little bit of a sponge right now in just taking everything, all the new skills that he's learning, and really being able to implement them inside the cage. And I don't know, man. I think that Barcelos hides his takedowns well, and that's key. If he wants to take Chris Gutierrez down, like in the Kurt Holliber fight, I didn't see any of those takedowns coming until they happened. So from that point of view, Barcelos, like I say, he hides them really well. But I feel that Chris Gutierrez has got a lot of advantage in this fight. The fact that Barcelos is dropping down, I know you said it's not a red flag for you. It potentially is for me. And I didn't think that Barcelos was that undersized against Holliber. And I'm actually quite surprised that he's dropping down to 135. I know he's weighed in at 144 pounds before, so it's not as if he ever struggled to get to the featherweight limit, but I am actually surprised he's dropping down, because that performance against Holliber was really impressive. So, for me, it's a red flag anyway. Obviously, different people see it different ways, and that's cool. I think Chris Gutierrez is going to get the win in this fight. I think it's going to be a fun fight. I think it's probably going to hit the scorecards. If there is a finish, it is more than likely going to be Barcelos, but I think Chris Gutierrez can use his kicks. He can slow Barcelos coming in and being aggressive. Once he starts to slow that attack down, he might then start to see any hidden takedowns becoming not so hidden, and then just use his Muay Thai just to really start picking his shots and getting his shots in there. So, it's a close fight, and to be honest with you, I'm not comfortable picking against Barcelos, but I just feel that style versus style, if Chris Gutierrez can really get going what he needs to in regards to winning this fight, in regards to a game planning and doing what he needs to do to slow Barcelos down and slow that aggression, I do see him being able to out volume Barcelos, which could look good on the judges' scorecard. So I've got Chris Gutierrez to win, and I've got him to win via decision. And then in the next fight of the night, we've got Tim Means versus Ricky Rainey. And man, looking at the lines, this fight looks really, really off to me. You've got Tim Means that last time I looked was a minus 380 favourite. Who have you got in this one, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting considering where Tim Means is at in his career. He's definitely slowed down a little bit. But one thing I'll say about him, even though he's not operating as fast as he used to, it's not like the guy's getting, laid out stiff every fight. It's not like it's not a Chuck Liddell situation or anything like that where, oh, look, Chuck's stiff on the canvas. You know what I'm saying, man?
Yeah,
So
sure.
I don't think it's one of those situations at all. I just think that, he's fighting really tough guys and like Bilal Muhammad, and he's been slowing down a little bit. But with Ricky Rainey, it's funny because if you check out my show, Half the Battle, we always make jokes about how, this guy wouldn't even win the NFC title. When we talk about that, we're referring to the Georgia local scene. Our promotion is called the NFC. And interestingly enough, Ricky Rainey actually fought in the NFC. His second and third pro fights were in the NFC. And let's just put it this way, my man. Ricky Rainey would not be the NFC welterweight champion. And I don't think he's probably going to get a UFC win here, unfortunately for him. So I think it's going to be 0-2. I mean, look, man, much respect to my boy Diego Lima, who's from ATL, but we know what Diego Lima's UFC record is, right, man? So Ricky Rainey lost to Diego Lima, just full disclosure. I think Tim Means a little bit cleaner striker. I think that I love the touch and go, the slip and rip. His pairing is on point. He's very tough to deal with southpaw. Ricky Rainey's got some strikes up his sleeve too. I just think it'll be a little bit closer than the line indicates, but I still see Tim Means going out there and getting the victory.
Yeah, I agree with you on this one. And even though, like I say, the line is really wide and it is really off, in my opinion, Tim Means is rightly favoured. And like you just mentioned, his striking is still crisp, it's still accurate. It's not something that, even though he hasn't looked good or amazing in his last few fights, you can still see that the fundamentals are there, and I think it's the fundamentals is what it's going to be to beat somebody like Ricky Rainey. I think the fight is going to predominantly stay standing, and I think it's going to be Ricky Rainey coming forward. I think it's going to be Tim Means throwing his ones and his 1-2s out there and just fighting maybe a little bit on the back foot, but angling off, and just the volume's going to be there all night for him. And if the fight does hit the mat, which I don't think it does, I think Tim Means has got an advantage there as well. So yeah, I don't really know what much else to say about Tim Means. I just think that, yeah, he's looked subpar lately, but I still think that sort of Tim Means is going to beat Ricky Rainey, and I'm not sure if he puts him away. I just think it's going to be a comfortable decision for Tim Means. So yeah, I've got Tim Means to win a unanimous decision on the scorecard. Then in the next fight of the night, we've got Roosevelt Roberts against Darrell Horcher. What about this one, Dan?
Man, I'm very intrigued to see where they line this fight. You know,
Same.
Oftentimes when you see these kids coming in with 6-0 records, you question the level of competition they fought, their seasoning, how well-rounded their skill sets truly are. But I feel like here with Roosevelt Roberts versus Darrell Horcher, Roosevelt's got the perfect stylistic matchup to come out here and style on his opponent and show off the great parts of his game, which is his takedown ability. The kid, first of all, let's bring up the fact that he's a 6'2" lightweight. You don't often see lightweights that tall, but not only is he tall, he's not tall and goofy. He's a tall, athletic specimen, and I know 3 years ago he was a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I have to assume he probably got promoted to brown belt by now. I've seen some of his grappling footage on, grappling competitions. Dude is nasty with the chokes, but then you saw him on Contender Series, and the way he chains his takedowns, his body lock, the pressure he brings to the table, his strength, and he can just keep going all day. So, I like Horcher. I think that he's a very tough guy. I think to come into the UFC on short notice and face Khabib Nurmagomedov in your debut is, much respect to Darrell Horcher. I'll tip my cap to a guy like that. And interestingly enough, you know how Khabib goes out there, Khabib never finishes a fight. Khabib never hits the under. The under never hits in the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, except for maybe the Thiago Tavares fight, right? The under hit in the Darrell Horcher fight. Let's just put it that way. Then Darrell barely scraped by Devin Powell, who, is probably among the worst lightweights on the roster. And then he got exposed in the exact same area Khabib exposed him in his very next fight against Scott Holtzman. So we know that Darrell Horcher's takedown defense and get-up game is an issue. Look, he's a tough guy. He's probably going to survive. I mean, it won't surprise me if Roosevelt comes out here and taps him out because he's got those long arms. He attacks for chokes from different angles. But, Horcher's a seasoned vet. He's fought in Bellator. He's fought in the UFC. His debut was against Khabib, like I mentioned, so it won't surprise me if Darrell Horcher comes out here and survives. Thing that Roosevelt's got to look out for is Darrell Horcher's left hand. He's got a dynamite left hand. He rocks everyone that he lands clean with that left hand. I mean, you saw even my boy Scotty Holtzman was doing the chicken dance at times. So Roosevelt definitely has to be concerned in that area. I mean, he's a very tall guy. Tall guys have tall man defense. But, man, his athleticism for being a 6'2" lightweight is truly something to behold. And he's only 6-0. I think he's going to pick up and slam Darrell Horcher and either get a submission or get a unanimous decision.
For sure. And just a quick mention with that Scott Holtzman fight, something that I'm not sure if I've ever got off my chest on a podcast, but I cashed my bet that night with Scott Holtzman as a plus 100 underdog. And, it was a nice cash and all, but that was the night, I don't know if you remember, where it was the first time I've seen it in all the years I've been watching mixed martial arts, where the referees were calling for stand-ups after 3 or 4 seconds on the mat. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. And so bad to the point in that Scott Holtzman fight where I was really sweating a bet that I really shouldn't have been sweating. And, Scott Holtzman got him down in the 3rd round, I think it was. He was passing he had Horcher up against the cage on his back. He was passing from half guard into mount whilst landing elbows to the head. And I'm sure it was Frank Trigman fucking stood them up. And at that point, I got a DM from my man MMA Trader on Twitter, and he just said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm fucking not okay." It really pissed me off that night. But yeah, back to the fight itself. I think Darrell Horcher's tough. He's grindy, he's gritty. You look at his 2 losses in the UFC. Scott Holtzman, what I've just mentioned, who is also an ugly, gritty fighter, but a winner at that as well. And then, like we've all already mentioned, Habib Nurmagomedov, we don't need to mention anything else about that fight. You know, the dude's 27-0. I just think that those two losses aren't bad. The one thing that stands out for me is, like you've already mentioned as well, the Devon Powell win, split decision. You know, just scraped by him, and I agree. I don't think too much to Devon Powell. So that's the one thing that stands out to me in regards to records and how he's looked in the UFC. Roosevelt Roberts, though, you know, a very interesting guy, as you've already mentioned, 6'2" lightweight, athletic. Always seems to be looking for the chokes as well. Whenever he's clinched against the cage, he'll not exit and back off. He'll turn and look for a choke, and it almost makes his opponents like panic a little bit and just keeps them thinking constantly on the cage. Normally when two fighters are clinched against the cage, they're just battling for the overs and unders and maybe looking for a level change, or one maybe looking to separate. Whereas what Roosevelt Roberts does in regards to looking for the guillotine and the arm around the neck is he just constantly keeps his opponents thinking of just something else. It's just something else to think about inside the cage, which is the last thing that you want as an opponent. So, yeah, I'm really interested to see where they line this fight as well, because as good and as athletic as I think Roosevelt Roberts is and what he will be and what he can progress to be in the UFC, the one type of fighter that I do think that he could lose a fight against is a gritty, ugly grinder, which is what Horcher is in a sense. He can make it ugly in there, and I think Roberts at times might struggle to style on somebody like that. So yeah, I'm going Roosevelt Roberts. I think he's going to win, and I also think he's going to win via submission as well, especially later on in the fight if he can get Horcher tired. Maybe Horcher gets a little bit lazy on the mat and does expose his neck, and Roberts takes that home with him. I genuinely see that as a plausible scenario, but I think what Horcher can offer in this fight in regards to a style versus style matchup may keep the books from lining this so wide. But Roberts definitely for me one to watch for the future. The guy looks extremely talented, and at 6-0 he's only going to get better and better, and I'm sure the dude's only 24 as well, so we can expect to see drastic improvements fight by fight. So I've got Roosevelt Roberts, and I've got him to win via submission. And then in the next fight of the night, and this one seems to be the people's main event, Dan, we've got Joseph Benavidez versus Alex Perez. Is it out with the old and in with the new, or has the old dog still got some tricks?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, my man. You can't you can't sit here and say that Joseph Benavidez doesn't have some tricks, because he absolutely does. I mean, the guy, first of all, besides his last fight, he had only lost to Dominic Cruz and Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. The guy's a consummate winner. He's had 30 professional fights, and he's won 25 of them. You know what I'm saying, man? So the guy is definitely a beast. He's a badass. He's married to Megan O'Leary. Like, what else can I say about Joseph Benavidez? I tip my cap to a guy like that. But do you remember when John Fitch got cut from the UFC, and people were asking him, "Oh, how could you cut John Fitch?" And Dana was like, "Look, guys, it's not like he's going from 15 to 10 to 1 in the rankings and we cut him. He went from 1 to 5 to 10 to 15 and we cut him." And not saying that Joe's going to get cut, not at all. But I'm just using that example to show that my boy Joseph Benavidez is no longer the number one contender in the flyweight division, which he was, I mean, for the longest time. It just shows that father time's a real thing, and now he is starting to get older. And look, the thing about Joseph Benavidez that people need to understand is that the guy is a max effort guy. If you want to beat this guy, you have to solidly outpoint him, or you have to knock him out stiff. And only one man has knocked him out stiff. Not saying it can't happen again. Sergio was able to drop him. However, Sergio isn't really known for finishing fights. Sergio, he likes to be pinpoint. He likes to tap and run. And I feel like a guy like Alex Perez, if he does land clean, you saw that aggression he showed against Jose Shorty Torres. When he hurt that guy, he put him out cold, my man. So what happens in this matchup, it's going to be interesting, because I feel like Alex Perez, he's massive for flyweight. Now, this fight's at bantamweight, so he's going to be even bigger at 135s. And my boy Joseph Benavidez, he's way too small for bantamweight. Obviously, I know people are going to bring up how he beat Wineland and how he beat all these guys back in the day. Like, guys, this isn't, Joseph Benavidez' early UFC career, the same the WEC, the old wave of the UFC flyweight division. When it was guys like Benavidez, guys like Ian McCall, right? So he's just from a different generation. Not saying he can't get tough as they come, and as recently as 2010, Alex Perez was getting tapped out by journeymen on the regional scene. However, he is training at Team Oyama, and you see the kind of improvements that those guys are making. For example, look at Marlon Chito Vera. A couple years ago, he's losing fights to guys like David Grant, and now he's going out there against John Lineker and winning the third round in Brazil on 2 judges' scorecards. So you cannot measure the kind of improvements that these young kids make. And Alex Perez is 26 years old. He's got a great wrestling background. So interestingly enough, I bring up that high school wrestling background. With Sergio Pettis, he stuffed about 13 of 14 takedowns. The one issue with Pettis has always been, the same issue his brother has. They can't get up from bottom. You know how we were mentioning, oh, look, Chuck Stiff on the canvas. Oh, look, Pettis is on his back, So that's always been the case. But Pettis actually got back up from Joseph Benavidez' takedown. I know Joseph was coming off a torn ACL, was coming off a layoff, looking older than ever. So I'm just saying, if my boy Sergio Pettis was able to get back up from the takedowns, what's going to happen when a guy that actually has a wrestling background, tries to get back up? I don't even think he'll get taken down. Now, the only reason why I might have slight hesitation to be super confident in a guy like Alex Perez, it's not often you see a plus next to a guy like Joseph Benavidez' name. You know what I mean? So I understand why people are taking the shot on Joseph Benavidez. The guy is so experienced. He's proven himself for years. But at some point, the new wave takes out the old wave, and I think this could be that situation. And I'm going to go with Alex Perez either via decision or knockout.
Yeah, the Sergio Pettis fight was one that I think really opened a lot of people's eyes to where Joe Benavidez is right now. And when I watched that fight live, I thought Pettis won it. I thought that was the right decision, but I've watched it a few times since then. I had a bet on Ray Borg a couple of weeks ago, so I've been through this fight way too many times than a human being deserves to. And I genuinely believe actually Joe Benavidez won that fight, but he didn't look good, and I put that down to more of what Sergio Pettis didn't do and what he could have done. So for me, Pettis, I almost feel that he was scared of getting taken down, and I think his takedown defense in that fight only looked so good because he was concentrating on it too much. He didn't let his shots go. Yes, he dropped Benavidez at the start of the first round, but then, after he didn't put the pressure on, he then got taken down, then Benavidez recovered, and I think from then on, Pettis was just looking for that one shot to finish Benavidez with, which we all know that's not how you beat Benavidez. You'll beat Benavidez, like you said, by putting the guy out or just outworking him, and outworking Benavidez isn't an easy thing to do. But somebody like Alex Perez has got that work rate, he's got that volume, he's got that aggression, and where Pettis, for example, was backing up when Benavidez was coming forward and winging these wild shots at him, Alex Perez ain't going to be backing up. Alex Perez will say, okay, he'll stand there and say, right, you want to wing these shots, man? Let's fucking go, bro, in the middle of the cage, and then they'll start banging it out. And in that sort of fight, I favour Alex Perez massively because he's quick, he's fast, he's accurate. We saw what he did to Jose Torres. He put a world of fucking pain on that dude. And Jose Torres is also a quick, fast striker with a Muay Thai background. So it's not as if Alex Perez had a huge advantage in the striking, but from a technical standpoint. But then obviously once they met in the middle and they started throwing down, then you saw how much of an advantage he had striking. So I think it's going to be difficult here for Benavidez. The other thing to mention as well is go back and watch that Benavidez and Sergio Pettis fight, because the disrespect Benavidez was showing Pettis with his hands low and swinging shots at him and moving forward with his chin out and just having no disregard for any sort of striking defense whatsoever. I'm really surprised Pettis didn't take advantage of that more. If he does that against Alex Perez, though, he's going to start getting tagged up. He's going to start getting out-volumed. The power's going to come on the chin. I do think that we see Benavidez drop. I'm not sure if Alex Perez finishes him because I don't think Benavidez is 100% done yet. I still think there's life left in him. I still think there's wins left in him. But I feel right now that we're crossing over here between, like I've already mentioned, the old and the new. And you mentioned Dan Joe Benavidez has had 30 fights. Well, Alex Perez has had 25. It's not as if there's a huge experience gap in regards to the volume of fights that they've had. Yes, Benavidez has fought the best of the best for most of his career, and that's obviously the reason why a lot of people are still feeling that Joe Benavidez is going to win that fight, because this is the biggest fight that Alex Perez has had. It's the best opponent Alex Perez will have faced in his career. I just think it's time, man. Sometimes it is what it is. It's just time for that guy to take that step up and to really put it on his opponent, and I think that's the case with Alex Perez. I don't think Perez has got too much to worry about from getting taken down. The dude's got a really good decorated wrestling background, wrestled at a good high school when he was younger. He's got good sprawls. He also locks up chokes from the front as well when he sprawls as well. So not that I think he'll catch Benavidez with anything like that, but just a point to mention. I think if either of these guys gets put on the back, I think they'll both spring back up to the feet. So I do think it's a fight that will take place on the feet. I just see Joe Benavidez getting tagged up. If he, like I've already mentioned, if he comes out striking like he did against Perez is going to make him pay. So I think it's going to go to the scorecards. I'm not going to disrespect Benavidez enough to say that I think Perez is going to do what he did against Jose Shorty Torres. But yeah, I've got Alex Perez to win in this fight via decision. Then in the next fight of the night, we've got another interesting one. We've got the newcomer, short notice, Kevin Aguilar versus Team Alpha Male's Rick Glenn. So Dan, who have you got in this one?
Intriguing matchup indeed. It first got matched up. You see the odds, you see the plus money next to Rick Glenn's name, and I thought to myself, oh man, the UFC vet, the guy who's more seasoned, this and that. But man, when I watched the tape, I kind of understand why Aguilar is favored. Now, we got to talk about this Contender Series fight real quick, because I know a lot of people are going to bring that up. First of all, if we're going to bring that up, then we have to mention the fact that it was up a weight class, and he was coming off the couch. It was a short notice fight, and he still went out there and won the decision. But prior to that, when you see him in his natural weight class, which is 145 pounds, I mean, he handled the guys on the regional scene that get you into the UFC exactly how you're supposed to. If you're on that LFA regional scene, that means you have to face guys like Ton Lee, guys like Damon Jackson, and I mean, even dating back to Nick Gonzalez and Ray Trujillo, but I'm more talking about the Ton Lees and the Damon Jacksons. He went out there, he stopped both those guys in devastating fashion, Ton Lee especially. I mean, Ton Lee's never been the same since that KO loss. And then the Contender Series fight happened, like I said, up a weight class off the couch. It wasn't the most impressive, but I feel like I learned more about Kevin Aguilar in his LFA fights. And what can I say about Rick Glenn? I mean, the guy's been around the scene for years. He's a super tall featherweight. I mean, it's not often you see 6 feet tall featherweights. Very long guy. Very tough, man. He's not the most athletic, but you start to slow down on a guy like Rick Glenn and ask Gavin Tucker what he's been up to these last few months. It might have even been over a year since Gavin Tucker's been inside that octagon. That's how bad Rick Glenn beat his ass. So, Kevin Aguilar, if his gas tank is a little suspect in this fight, then I do think Rick Glenn will take over. However, I don't see it being that way, my man. I think that at 145 pounds, that is where Aguilar belongs. I think he's got a very nice jab. And I think it's going to be a close fight, so I understand people taking the shot on Rick Glenn for sure. I mean, he's always a live dog. The guy's in there in every fight he's in. But that being said, I think Kevin Aguilar lands the harder shots for the 3-round duration, and I think he takes home a decision here.
Yeah, I'm going the other way here, and I'll tell you why. I just think it's, I think stylistically, it's not a great fight for Aguilar, and there was, for me anyway, from the stuff I was reading and seeing on MMA Twitter, there's a lot of hype on Aguilar, and I do get it. The guy looks good. His striking is fundamentally good, very good technically on the feet, but I just feel that outside of his boxing and his hands, I'm not sure how else he can give his opponents much trouble. I think the other thing to mention with this as well is Rick Glenn's a southpaw facing the orthodox stance of Aguilar, and what Rick Glenn's been evolving since he's got into the UFC, and especially since he's moved to Team Alpha Male, and you see these new little things that he does, and sometimes it's just really simple things like the left body kick that Glenn uses a lot. He'll just throw it out. He might not throw it out to damage his opponent or to hurt his opponent, but he'll throw it out there just to mix things up, to keep them away, to gauge his distance. Like you've already mentioned, he's a tall featherweight. You don't really get featherweights that tall, so for any tall fighter in a division, the best thing that you can do is learn how to use your range, use your height, and use your distance. And I think that's what Rick Glenn is starting to learn. And I just feel that he manages his distance really well, and it becomes more apparent every single time we see him inside the cage. Now, the other thing as well, and this is something that I personally hold in high regard, is the coaching of Danny Castillo from Team Alpha Male. I think he's one of the best out there, and the reason I say that is he gets the best out of his fighters, and most of the time his fighters overperform. It's almost a case of when he's coaching a fighter and he's game planned a specific fight, if his fighter goes out there and loses, it's definitely because the other guy was just a better fighter on the night. Andre Fili against Michael Johnson, I think it was a fight that I bet on. Was a close fight, but I just feel that Andre Fili overperformed in that fight. He looked really good. His wrestling was actually good against Michael Johnson, who's got a wrestling background as well. So I think that Danny Castillo has to have game planned a wrestling. Has to have included takedowns in this game plan for this fight, because one deficiency I've noticed of Kevin Aguilar is when he's on his back. When he's on his back, he doesn't really offer too much. He doesn't have bad takedown defense, and he can get back up until the point where his shoulders and his back are flat on the mat. And once it gets to that point, he really does struggle. And I think Rick Glenn's grappling topside will be good enough to keep Aguilar down on the mat if he chooses to do so. But then on the feet, Aguilar's got to come forward. He's got to get inside. He's got to land those strikes, those punches to start out voluming Glenn, or to try and put Rick Glenn out, which is going to be a tough ask to put the dude out, by the way. But I think that if Rick Glenn's got the right game plan in this fight, he's definitely going to cause Aguilar a lot of problems. And if the game plan I think he's gonna go with, and he executes it, I don't see Aguilar winning. I think that Rick Glenn's going to be using his left kick, his body kick, mixing it low and high, just keeping Aguilar from getting forward too aggressive and landing the shots inside. And then I think when he does get inside, Rick Glenn can tap that knee, get him down on the mat, and just work some grappling on top, waste time on the clock, win rounds. And I think that's what we're going to see in this fight. Aguilar's path to victory for me is to get inside and to land some killer shots, to hurt Rick Glenn. It is possible to do. I'm making Rick Glenn sound like a ridiculously world-class fighter here. I think he's a good fighter. I don't think he's sort of on the level that I might be making him sound. But Miles Jury went out there and performed great against him, but Miles Jury mixed in takedowns in that fight and managed to get a lot of time on top and really slow and really make Rick Glenn work. Don't think Aguilar can do that. So for me, I see Rick Glenn winning a decision, and you know what, I could see it being unanimous as well. So I've got Rick Glenn to win via decision. Then in the next fight of the night, we've got Yeon Kim versus Antonina Shevchenko, the sister of the famous Valentina. Who have you got in this one, Dan?
I'm very excited for this matchup, man, because originally it was supposed to be Antonina Shevchenko versus Ashley Evans-Smith, and I felt like that was a super favorable matchup for Antonina. I felt like Antonina was going to go out there and get a second-round TKO in that one via knees to the body from the Muay Thai clinch. But now with Yeon Kim, it's a completely different matchup, man, because Yeon Kim will give Antonina Shevchenko the stand-up fight she wants, but unlike Ashley Evans-Smith, Yeon Kim can actually stand up and strike. However, there is a big difference in the levels of their striking, because when you talk about Antonina Shevchenko, I mean, she went 39-1 as a pro kickboxer. You know what I mean? That only loss was in 2003. That was a very long time ago, Newsome. So, she's a great pro kickboxer, and if she was fighting a wrestler, and it's funny because I said if she was fighting Ashley Evans-Smith, I'd pick her via TKO, who is a wrestler, but you know how these Ashley Evans-Smith fights go. She lost to Sarah Morass in the very first round, so I thought it was easy work for Shevchenko. But now with Yeon Kim, man, I like this fight a lot. I've been high on Yeon Kim. I know a lot of people thought she got robbed a lot of people thought that Justine Kish got robbed in the Yeon Kim fight. I kind of disagree with that. I thought Yeon Kim won the second and third round, edged it, but still went out there and won. And then her last fight against Melinda Fabian, I like that performance as well. I feel like for MMA, Jeon Kim might have the sharper hands because Antonina, what she really likes to do is get in that Muay Thai plum, that clinch, and fire big knees to the body, knees to the head. Her point fighting game is very, very on point. And if these girls can't keep pummeling and keep swimming for underhooks, they're going to get absolutely destroyed. So I said second round TKO for Ashley Evans-Smith, but I think that Jeon Kim lasts the full distance. I think she makes it a tough fight. And I think if she can get it into boxing range and start landing some punches, that it could get interesting. However, I think when she does that, the taller Shevchenko is going to put her in that Thai plum, fire off those big knees, edge out the rounds, and I see Antonina winning a decision here.
Plus 275, though, for Jeon Kim.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. She's always a live dog. She always comes to fight. You know, a lot of people have negative things to say about Asian MMA, but you know what I got to say about that, man? The Chinese and the Koreans, their emerging prospects are mean as hell, and they come to fight. I know Japan doesn't have the best MMA scene in terms of talent. I mean, they're obviously legendary. They're legendary. Pride was in Japan, all that. But I'm just saying, as far as the up-and-coming prospects, it's all about China and Korea. So Jeon Kim's Korean, man. She's tough. She's tough as hell. I don't fault anyone for taking a 1-unit shot, a 2-unit shot on Jeon Kim here, but I simply think Antonina edges her.
Yeah, I agree, and it's almost one of those fights where, for one fighter's path to victory and their advantages, and where they will have success in a fight, you're entering also the opponent's path to victory and where they want the fight as well. And I agree with you, and for that reason, I think it's going to be also a really good, interesting, fun fight to watch for sure, because like we've already mentioned, Jeon Kim's going to need to get into boxing range. She's going to have to work in she's going to want to work inside, because that's where she operates inside that boxing range. And like you've already mentioned, for Antonina Shevchenko, she's got that Muay Thai background, that kickboxing background. She's going to want Jeon Kim inside. She's going to want to tie her up in the clinch. She's going to want to land the knees and the elbows and the short shots, and just, you know, run the clock down with these short shots. Like you've also mentioned, you covered a lot of points in this fight that are relevant, to be honest, in regards to the point fighting. I think that Jeon Kim's going to have her moments in this fight for sure. I think she's definitely going to start landing shots on Shevchenko, definitely. But ultimately, I think as the fight goes on, Shevchenko will just start seeing more success. She'll start landing more. The volume will become more apparent. And I just think that she'll have more dominant spells against the cage as well. And it's little things like that that the judges look for in a close fight. And when one person's dominating on the cage and one person's back is against the cage, it sort of almost becomes apparent to which way the judges are going to score the fight. And that's where I think the fight's going to go. So I've got Antonina Shevchenko to win via decision. Then in the next fight of the night, we've got another interesting one, because we've got Darren Stewart returning against the UFC debutant Edmen Shahbazyan. And Shahbazyan is, I've not found too much on the dude. There's not a lot out there to see, you know, only a couple of clips. So I'm interested to see what you think in this one, Dan.
Well, one thing we know about Edmen Shahbazyan is that none of his fights go past the first round, and he's coached by the legendary Edmen Tarverdian. So if you start hearing head movement in the corner, don't think that you accidentally have Ronda Rousey on another source, because it actually is Edmen in the corner of Edmen Shahbazyan. I mean, look, a fighter named Edmen is coached by a coach named Edmen. I mean, what else do I have to say? And it is the legendary Edmen Tarverdian. So, look, Shahbazyan, all his fights are first-round finishes. He literally just goes out there and steamrolls these guys. On one hand, you can look at it like he's never been past the first round. He hasn't fought anyone. He doesn't know what adversity is like, what happens when he goes past the first minute of the first round, right? But at the same time, you can also say he went out there and handled those cans exactly how you're supposed to, which is get him out of there right away. So I respect that for sure. But making your UFC debut against a guy like Darren Stewart, who, man, this guy's been through the ringer since he's been in the UFC. And I feel like his last two fights, ever since he started seeing that mental coach, he's definitely jumped over. He's definitely broken down barriers, man. That's one thing I got to say about a guy like Darren Stewart, because it seemed like in some of those losses, I felt like he was performing well, but he would hit this wall where whether it was fatigue, whether it was getting tapped out, whatever it was, man, something would go wrong in the middle of his fights. But then you saw his last one there against Charles Byrd. I know the Eric Spicely fight was smooth sailing, but you saw the last fight against Charles Byrd, and it seemed like the fight was about to go Charles Byrd's way. And based on past Darren Stewart performances, oftentimes when shit doesn't go his way early, he'll lose the fight, man. And in this one, he was able to come back. So I felt like that was getting over a big hump for a guy like Darren Stewart, and that had to have given him a serious amount of confidence, especially going into this fight. So back to the whole first round thing with Edmen Shahbazyan. I mean, is Edmen going to come out here and just steamroll Darren Stewart? Is he on that level yet? Hey, if he is, much respect, because that's a fucking big deal to come out here and knock out a guy like Darren Stewart in the first round. But based on the evidence I've seen, I think that Darren Stewart can weather that early storm, and I think he can take Edmen to the deep waters that he's never been in. And I see Darren getting a second or third round stoppage.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was speaking to someone that's close to Edmen, and honestly, man, they only had awesome words to say about him in regards to how good this kid is, how high his ceiling is. So it's almost for me like I'm hearing that, and honestly, I can get a good sense when it's biased comments and biased talk, and it's not that. I'm telling you, from what I was hearing, this kid sounds really special, and this is someone that's, like I say, that's close to him, that's seen his fights on the regional scenes, seen the stuff that we can't see because it's not online, it's not on the internet. So, yeah, man. From one side, I'm hearing stuff like that. From another side, what I'm seeing from the one fight that I've been able to watch from Edmen is a guy that does go in there, that flurries, that steamrolls and throws the shots that when one of them connects, it'll put a guy down. But if anybody can come through adversity, it's Darren Stewart. Like you've already mentioned with the Charles Byrd fight, it looked plain sailing in that fight. It looked like Charles Byrd was just going to cruise to a win pretty much however he wanted, and then bang, the wall of Darren Stewart just said, nope, not today, son, put him down. And that was the beginning of the end. And we also saw a tough, gritty fight with Julian Marquez as well. That fight was insane with the blows that were being landed, and Darren Stewart took as many as he gave. Eventually the fight didn't go the way he wanted it to, but man, that was heart what he showed in there against Julian Marquez, that was landing some really, really solid shots on him. So for me, from what I've seen, and like you've just said, we can only go on what we've seen and the evidence and what we've been brought to in tape. And I think that, again, I agree with you. Darren Stewart, I think, can weather a storm. If Edmen does come out hard and he does land his hardest shots and Darren Stewart eats them, then Stewart's going to come back. We know he's going to come back, and he'll come back hard if Edmen starts tiring after he gets out of round one. Again, from what I'm hearing from Edmen's side, though, he is very prepared for 15 minutes. So, like I say, I'm hearing one thing and seeing another. So, from all that I can go on, and from what I trust is my eyes. I trust the information that I'm being given as well. But ultimately, when it comes to a pick, I can only pick what I can see. So I'm going to pick Darren Stewart. I don't think this fight is gonna see the scorecards regardless of which way it goes. So I'm going to pick Darren Stewart to get Edmen Shahbazyan out of there. Then in the co-main event of the evening, 5 Dimes nearly dropped the ball on this. Open Pedro Munoz at plus 195. Quickly switched around and quickly voided everybody's bets against Bryan Caraway. So Dan, who have you got in this one?
Well, what I really want to know is which guys went out there and tracked those plus money Pedro Munoz bets. That's what I want to know, Newsome, right? But
I don't think there was enough time, man. I don't think there was enough time. It'd have been interesting if there was a couple of hours of it, and it's always interesting.
You'd be surprised the stunts some of these guys pulled. But look, man, as far as this matchup's concerned, I think that this one has fight of the night written all over it. I think it's going to be an epic war. And I'm very excited about the prospects of it. You see a plus 200 next to a guy like Bryan Caraway's name. And for me, I have a history betting this guy as the underdog. And he has a history of winning as the underdog. I mean, I remember when I bet that plus 350 against Aljamain Sterling, and he went out there and broke the young man. So I got so much respect for a guy like Bryan Caraway, and there's a lot of myths surrounding Bryan Caraway that he's a decisionator and this and that. Well, if he was a decisionator, then why are 18 of his 21 professional wins finishes? You know what I'm saying? The guy's a finisher. So a lot of people are saying how Pedro Munoz is going to come out here and guillotine Bryan Caraway. I highly doubt that's going to happen, my man. You know that Bryan Caraway has as many submissions on his record as Pedro Munoz has wins? He has 16 submission wins. That's all I got to say. Bryan Caraway is an absolute finisher. He's opportunistic. And you fuck up on a guy like that, and he will tap you out. But the same thing can be said about the favorite, Pedro Munoz here. One of the deadliest guillotines in the game. Once again, I don't think he's going to land it in this fight. So I think it's going to come down to what happens in the brawl. And I think he's got more volume than Bryan Caraway. You know, Bryan Caraway does have an opportunistic left hook, and he was able to go out there and win the striking battle against Eddie Wineland. But I felt like Eddie Wineland, no excuses, all respect to Bryan Caraway, but I felt like Eddie Wineland was a bit gun-shy in that fight. I think he was coming off a broken jaw against Johnny Eduardo. I think he just didn't want to pull the trigger that night, and Bryan Caraway once again came through as the underdog and outstruck him for 3 rounds. So I like Bryan Caraway a lot. I think he gets a lot of unnecessary heat. But, man, this is a tough matchup for him because oftentimes Bryan has a big advantage on the mat against these guys. I mean, you saw the 2 times the fight hit the mat against Cody Stamann, and you know, a couple seconds left, and it might have been a submission win for Bryan Caraway. Similarly, do you remember that fight between Cynthia Calvillo and Joanne Calderwood? If there would have been 10, 15 more seconds on the clock, you know, she would have got a submission win. So I felt like it was that kind of situation. But here, if they scramble, it's going to be super exciting. But once again, I think it comes down to the volume of Pedro Munoz. Now, I know at times his striking defense isn't the prettiest. Pedro Munoz gets hit a lot. He is sometimes a walking punching bag, but man, his chin is iron. One day he's going to get laid out, but I don't think it's against a guy like Bryan Caraway. I simply think that they're going to have a 3-round fight of the night. I'm going to go 29-28 unanimous decision for Pedro Munoz, but Bryan Caraway is definitely a live dog in this spot.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I almost feel that it depends on what Bryan Caraway does in this fight, because if Bryan Caraway adopts the same game plan as he adopted against Cody Stamann, I mean, let's be honest, there wasn't much part of that fight that was striking in open distance and back and forth with strikes. Bryan Caraway was as relentless as you'll ever see in MMA. You know, just wanting to. I'm sure there was a time in that fight where he literally shot in like 4 or 5 times in a row. Like, as soon as he stepped back, he was straight in there. Step back, straight in there. He was relentless. And I feel that if he does that against Pedro Munoz, I don't know how Munoz will sort of overcome that. You know, it'll be something that we've not seen him have to overcome. A relentless wrestler, a relentless grappler, someone that wants him on the mat that much. But I think if Bryan Caraway does that, on the flip side, then he runs the risk of Pedro Munoz being able to figure out how to get his arm around the neck, how to wrap up that guillotine, that nasty as fuck guillotine, which doesn't allow you to tap out with your hand. You know, it's brutal. So although I feel that Bryan Caraway won't be put off by trying to take Munoz down because of the guillotine, I do think he really has to be careful if he's relentless with his wrestling, because a guy as high level as Munoz with his grappling, and when you're a specialist at a particular submission, you will eventually, after 4, 5, 6 attempts at takedowns, you will start to figure out how to get this guy. Pedro Munoz has even got a side. You know, you'll see him give up the guillotine on one side to try and get over to the other side. So you've got to be careful with a specialist like that. However, if Bryan Caraway isn't relentless and it is just opportunistic shots as and when he feels that he can try and get the fight to the mat and get himself in a dominant top position, I do feel that we'll have long periods of striking in this fight where I feel Pedro Munoz has got the biggest advantage, and the biggest advantage in the fight as well. I just don't see Bryan Caraway being able to outstrike or outvolume someone like Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz is accurate. He packs power as well. We saw how many times he hurt Brett Johns. Credit to Brett Johns in that fight, by the way. I just want to put that out there. What a fucking warrior to stay in that fight. But But yeah, he packs power, he packs volume, and he's accurate. And that's three things in the striking department what's really going to give Bryan Caraway some trouble. I do think Bryan Caraway is going to have some success in this fight. I do feel that he steals around at some point in the fight, but I agree with you. I think Pedro Munhoz is going to get it done via 29-28 decision. And then in the main event of the evening, and man, this is so exciting. And, you know, I tweeted something out earlier on in the week about how this fight just isn't being spoken about. And it's still not, to an extent. It's crazy. I don't understand how this fight has flown under the radar so much. We've got Rafael dos Anjos versus Kamaru Usman. So, Dan, what's your thoughts? Who you got?
Man, my thoughts are that I'm going to be extremely sad when this fight is over, man, because I'm a big fan of Rafael dos Anjos, especially compared to Kamaru Usman. Look, much respect to Usman, super physical guy, gone out there, won all his UFC fights. Definitely is in the position he's in for a reason, no doubt about that. But, you know, let's take off the betting cap for a second and put on the fan cap. I mean, they call him the Nigerian nightmare. I call him the Nigerian NyQuil. I mean, the guy, if you have trouble sleeping, you just watch a Kamaru Usman fight, you'll go right to sleep. I know someone's going to bring up his one exciting fight against Serginho Moraes, but let's be honest, the other ones were just I mean, that Damian Maia fight, I left the bar after the third round, you know, because I was too worried about passing out. You know what I'm saying, Matt? But as far as this matchup is concerned, I'd love to see RDA keep distance, blast that left kick to the liver, stuff the takedowns, get off on the boxing, and, you know, maybe sprawl on a takedown, take his back, and choke him out, because RDA's got a great jiu-jitsu black belt. His stand-up's obviously way better than Kamaru Usman's, but historically speaking, RDA does not do good against this kind of matchup. Yeah, we can talk about Colby, but I mean, it's not just Colby. It dates back to Khabib. It dates back to Gleison Tibau. I mean, the history of RDA, the way to beat this guy, you got to have a relentless grinder in there, and that's exactly what Kamaru Usman is, not to mention up a weight class at 170 pounds. I know RDA, he went out there, finished Magny in the first round, beat Robbie Lawler, beat Tarek Saffiedine, but Kamaru represents that new wave that we were talking about earlier. And as much as I'd love to see RDA go out there, fold him with a body kick, a flying knee, a guillotine, something like that, I think he's going to get pushed up against the fence for 5 rounds. Then the takedowns are going to start to add up. Then some ground and pound. I see Kamaru winning a very boring decision here. But I hope I am extremely wrong, and I hope RDA goes out there and stops him, but I don't see that happening. I got Kamaru via decision.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way, man. And as you've said, I've been a massive fan of RDA for so many years. He's exciting, man. He's an all-round fighter that he can take the fight anywhere, and especially when he was the lightweight champion as well, and he was finishing everybody, and even the rise to get that title shot was just exciting as well. The dude has put on and given us so much in the world of mixed martial arts. You know, you can't really put it into words, but like you said again, going back to who's going to win the fight, it's tough. It's tough to see RDA getting his hand raised at the end of this fight unless he can get that liver kick, or he can put Usman into some horrible positions and, you know, catch him and rock him and then really start to work on him. But it's tough to see that happening now. I do think that everyone seems to be going back to this Colby fight, and honestly, I rewatched that fight because for me, watching the Rafael dos Anjos and Colby Covington fight, I think it was at like 5 a.m. in the morning, man, so you can understand, you know, the sort of situation I was in at that point watching that sort of fight. And so I had to go back and rewatch it just to get a much better grip on what happened in that fight. And I scored that 4 rounds to 1 for Colby, but I don't think that scorecard really paints the picture to how that fight went down, because I think RDA did a lot better what I gave him credit for and what a lot of other people gave him credit for as well. Yes, Colby landed, I think it was 7 or 8 takedowns, but he also attempted to land like 21, 22. So RDA's takedown defense was actually really on point against Colby Covington, and the reason Colby won that fight was relentless pressure. Like, Colby laid a blueprint out of how to beat RDA perfectly, but the problem is Colby laid this blueprint out that I don't think anybody else can follow. You know, that's Colby Covington. That's the legend he is. You know, he's a great fighter, and he can do things in that cage that others simply can't. And that pressure he put on there, I don't believe anybody else can put that forward pressure and that relentless pressure, constant pressure for 25 minutes in a fight. Now, the difference between Colby and Usman, I think that Usman definitely can't match that match that pressure, that constant pressure that I've just spoken about. But the difference and the advantage that Usman has over Colby is, I think Usman is the better grappler. So Colby was dumping RDA. RDA was standing back up and he would go in for another takedown, press him against the cage, manage to get another takedown, then RDA would stand back up. Colby isn't the best grappler. He's a phenomenal wrestler, but there's a difference between wrestling and grappling. And listen, it's no secret when a guy's scoring 7, 8, 9, 10 takedowns in a fight that it's obvious why they're scoring that many takedowns, because their opponents keep standing back up, which then you've got to start labeling as a deficiency in the grappling department. Now, with Usman, it's completely different, I think, because I think he is the better grappler. I think he can get the top time that Colby couldn't get on RDA, and I think that's going to be the difference. I think Usman can't match the output and the pressure that Colby put on RDA, but Usman can have success in controlling RDA on the mat, wasting time on the clock that way, and by doing that, he doesn't need to match Colby's aggression and pressure. Like you've said, I absolutely hope I'm wrong in this fight. I hope RDA goes out there and gets the win, but I can't see past an Usman win. This division is going to end up being Kamaru, Usman, and Colby Covington just running it in sort of like for the next 3-4 years until somebody else comes up. But the problem that you've got against Usman and Colby is this wrestling, which in my opinion is the strongest discipline in mixed martial arts. When you're a solid wrestler, you can get fights to the mat and you can spend time on top. It's going to be tough to beat. You look at a lot of the successful champions over the years in the UFC. George St. Pierre is another example. You couldn't beat that guy unless you were called Johnny Hendricks and you got robbed. You couldn't beat that guy because he was so good at taking you down. He was so good at controlling you on the mat. And I just feel like it's the same with Usman. It's the same with Colby. I think anybody is going to struggle to beat these two guys. So I've got Kamaru Usman winning. I've also got him winning via decision as well. And that's all she wrote, guys. So for the bets this week across 2, maybe 3 or 4 fight cards, don't forget to check out the premium bets from Newsome MMA and the membership options available too. And never hesitate to contact me if you've got any questions or inquiries. Dan, before we hit the Newsome MMA 2-minute plug, you're up, my man. What have you got to plug?
Well, firstly, man, thank you so much for having me on the show. Always a pleasure to talk fights with you. And for all the listeners of the show, thank you guys as well. I love the UK, so much love and respect to all you guys. And yeah, I mean, just follow me on Twitter at Best Fight Picks. And I have a show called Half the Battle, and it's available anywhere that you can find podcasts. So check that out. Thank you again. And let's cash these bets, my man.
It's my pleasure, Dan. Thanks a lot for coming on. Now for the quick Newsome MMA 2-minute plug. First of all, I'd like to talk about Concussion Pro 1, who are partner in Newsome MMA. Concussion Pro 1 is the world's first dedicated concussion supplement supporting brain health and performance. This product is honestly groundbreaking. There isn't another supplement like it on the market. The unique formula that makes up Concussion Pro 1 has been developed and created by some of the world's most decorated sports scientists to help protect and support the brain and its performance. Approved by the UK Mixed Martial Arts Federation, Concussion Pro 1 provides some amazing support to the brain. It increases mental performance, faster recovery from injury, reduced inflammation post-impact, improved neural protection and much more. With the professional athletes such as Alexander Rakic, Mark Diakase and Scott Askham using Concussion Pro 1, you can already see how vital this product is, not only for MMA but for all combat sports. Find out more information by clicking on any of the banners on the Newsome MMA website or go to concussionpro1.com. Secondly, please check out the sponsor of Newsome MMA, which is CBDLife UK. I'm a great case study for CBD. In the MMA gambling world, people often talk about sweats and nerves as they're watching the fight and they've bet on fight. These feelings are absolutely real, man, and because of this I vape CBD to help me relax on fight night. If I'm honest, I didn't think it would make much of a difference, but it really does, and I would honestly recommend it to anybody, especially you MMA gamblers. You can access the offers from my sponsorship by clicking on any of the banners on the Newsome MMA website, and you can also get 15% off your first order by using promo code Newsome MMA. And that's it from us, guys. Enjoy the fights on Friday and Saturday night. The UFC Adelaide podcast will be recorded tomorrow, dropping Wednesday. Thank you and goodbye.